Do you like to binge watch TV? Did you know you could binge listen to podcasts? Head over to electronicmediacollective.com, where they have podcasts for days. You like podcasts about wrestling? They have that. Do you like podcasts about TV and film? They have that. Do you like podcasts about horror? EMC has that too. Do you like comedy? Do you like books? Guess what? They've got you covered. Head over to electronicmediacollective.com. Pick your favorite podcast today.
This is a warning to all living mortals. Moose will release 13 of the most terrifying interviews of horror unto the world.
Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to another installment of the 13 Horrifying Days of Christmas. I'm your host and gift giver, Moose. And joining me today, you know him from The Walking Dead, you know him from Devil's Rejects, you know him from a lot, actually. And we'll get into that and so much more. Please welcome athlete, actor, and cancer survivor, Mr. Lew Temple.
Hi, Moose. Thanks for having me today. It's always good to be on Moose's Monster here and to visit about, all things horror. And we've already had a nice conversation leading in. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, the chats prior to recording are always fun because it's kind of breaks the ice a little bit. It gets the flow going, and it's not like a cold open.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important. We do that on set too. We try to kind of find a little chemistry before we mix it up out on the dance floor. And oftentimes we'll find some commonality or recognize we have no commonality, which is also fun. And all of a sudden have to be, joined at the hip in some epic battle against good or evil, and we're all we're teammates and we vaguely know each other. So yeah, it's amazing what you can do if you just keep an open mind, I suppose.
Well, that's why it's acting.
Yeah.
So I scroll through your IMDb list, and like I mentioned prior, I listened to a bunch of interviews, and I was curious. You run the convention scene, you do interviews. In your opinion, what do you think? What's the most? What question do you get asked the most?
I suppose it's always the same question that anyone gets asked, which is, how did you get started? How did you become an actor? What did you always want to be an actor? Did you grow up wanting to use your imagination and play or whatnot? And so I get asked that quite a lot. And I have just a basic story, and the answer to that is no. I never even considered being an actor, and in my generation, in my youth, that wasn't something that people did. I didn't even really realize that actors were a thing. I literally thought they were real people, and we were just watching their lives like the Truman Show. So I didn't understand what an actor was. So I had no interest in or idea of being one. For me, Lee Majors, whoever that was Steve Austin, the $6 Million Man. It was cool that they had made him bionic. And I'd never met anyone who was bionic.
If only they could do that now.
Yeah, I imagine with these AI robots, we're getting close. But so that wasn't. So the answer to that question is I wasn't interested in that. I didn't grow up with that dream, and that didn't bite me until I followed a girl into a building to ask her for a date in Houston, Texas, and it was a theater, and I recognized what they were doing looked like something that I thought I could do, which I couldn't, but I wanted to learn. So that was kind of how I fell into acting. And I had a great career in life, looking back on it at the time, that I walked away from to pursue acting. And so that's the question I get asked.
Yeah, I was going to say, you had a hell of a baseball career.
Yeah. And so that would be the thing that I dreamt about. That would be the passion that I had, was to be a Major League Baseball player, to play baseball, to be in baseball. And for a large part of my youth, that was exactly what I did. And then interestingly, I've only done two baseball movies, but if you think about it, there's not a lot of baseball movies that are made, but I have done two, one being Angels in the Outfield.
Which is probably one of like the biggest, aside from like Field of Dreams.
Yeah, there's a lot of good baseball movies, and that was definitely a Disney film that had its place in its time. And then recently I did this movie called You Gotta Believe, which is a true story about a Little League team out of Fort Worth, Texas, that went to the Little League World Series and darn near won against all odds. And that was just so much fun for me to go back and be part of baseball. It's not an easy subject to tell a story around, but baseball is built on story and lore and history and rumor and gossip, and it's entirely a place where entertainment can really grow. So, but back to your question, that's the question I get asked a lot. How'd you get started? And I suppose that's the question that people get asked in all walks of life, like, well, how did you end up being a welder? And wow, did you always want to be a welder? No, I actually, I flunked out of law school, and my brother-in-law
pay the bills.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know if there's an answer for your origin story. We should all know our origin story. So
I wanted to be a body repairman, but the money wasn't there. So then I went to work in a grocery store, and now I work security.
Yeah. So, well, that's very cool. I'm assuming working security requires a certification.
It depends. Like, so where I work, not so much. A little bit of training, but it's laid back. It's, we don't carry any weapons. It's you're bouncing drunks, and you're making sure minors don't drink.
Got you.
So all in all, my job is relatively easy, and I have it easier than some of the guys I work with because I'm 6'3", almost 400 pounds. I can usually just walk up to a guy and tell them, hey, you're done. And they're like, okay. And they leave no problem, Whereas, like, maybe somebody your size would walk up and be like, to the same drunk and be like, hey, you're done. And they're like, no, I'm going to stay for a little bit and, want to, push back a little. And we get that with some of my coworkers, and it's like, come on, guy, just leave.
Then I come get you to.
That's usually what happens. Yeah.
To heighten my point and or my request, right?
I'm the heavy, yeah.
Right on.
So, you wanted baseball. Who was? This is a two-part question. Who were your inspirations, and when you were dreaming manifesting your dream for baseball, what teams did you want to? Did you see yourself playing for?
Oh, well, my favorite team at the time was like the best team in the 70s for me That's an opinion and so subjective as teams go. But I was a Cincinnati Red fan. They were the big red machine. Johnny Bench was a hero of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I loved how that team was put together, and I loved how they played and beat people. So, in particular, they were kind of the white hat good guys, clean cut for the most part, and so that was inspiring. I also, because I love baseball so much, was a bit of a historian, because I just devoured any baseball information that I could, from encyclopedias to biographies. So I was well versed in the Babe Ruths and the Mickey Mantles and the Willie Mazes and the Jackie Robinsons and Henry Aaron's. I knew their stories, so they all were inspiring to me. And then the more that I got exposed to, I suppose, different television opportunities, the Braves, because they were TBS and America's team, so to speak. They were on TV a lot. They weren't very good, but they were on TV. So I sort of became a Braves fan, and I still am a Braves fan, even though my professional career was spent with the Houston Astros. And while I was there, certainly I was an Astros fan. And I would be to this day, other than they've changed ownerships a couple of times, and I'm not a fan of their current ownership, only because when they did make some changes, they let a lot of my friends go. They just fired them. And so I felt like, I'm not going to support you. You're not supporting my friends. Let's go with someone else. So I like the Braves. And I'm, that being said, there is a ex-Brave that plays here in Los Angeles, the world champion Los Angeles Dodgers. He is a big part of the team, Freddie Freeman, and so I do root for him as a Dodger. But for the most part, my whole life, I've rooted against the dreaded Dodgers. So, and they're also the clean cut kind of good, good guys. But and the Yankees' history has always been hard to overlook. So, certainly that Yankee history in the past. So I've known the Yankees in when they weren't very good, prior to, prior to the Reggie Jackson era and Thurman Munson, when they were struggling a little bit. They weren't the Yankees, but right around 76, they started to get dialed into the free agent market and understand how to buy a winning season.
Saying they created that sleeping giant.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to be said for legacy and history, culture, I suppose, and so we have it in our industry as well, so take the Halloween franchise, which you're very well aware of, in and of itself, that franchise is historic, and it requires a certain level of intensity that follows Michael Myers, regardless of how you're going to present the story. And I would think that I know that's the same for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise as well. There's a histrionic to that requires sort of a responsibility to the audience. Leatherface has to wield a chainsaw. He can't come out with a 38 special or a 357 Python like Dirty Harry. He needs to crank even an electric chainsaw, I think, would not work for him. Michael Myers probably
Leatherface goes green.
Yeah. So you get it, and so I like history well enough. I like the idea of where we come from, where we come to have ideologies. And so I wouldn't say I'm a history buff, but I'm definitely a history. I respect history. I do.
There's a quote that gets thrown around a lot. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And I've always loved history. And you have to find a balance between being like a history buff and appreciating history. Whether it's, the history of one particular topic or just history in general. Like, there are people who are, like war historians, really like the history of battles and stuff. And that's cool. That they have something that piques their interest. It's a hobby. That's awesome. I kind of dance across the board between history of film, history, world history. I did a paper one time on comparing ancient Rome to America, and how they're, the empires as they were are very similar in how they overreach. So it gives you a broader view on life and how you can approach your day to day, and it gives you a better appreciation on what you're doing with your life and what you're doing with others. Right. And in the sense of movies, I mean, you've been a part of the remake of two of the franchises you just mentioned, Texas Chainsaw and Halloween. So
yeah, I underestimate that too, because I don't give myself or my filmography enough credit to say that I have been part of those two. Because if you think about it, I just need one more for, the perfect trifecta. I don't know if that's a Jason movie or a Freddy Krueger movie. I don't actually know who the Holy Trinity is of villainry. I would probably say Jason, just based on the history, but I could be wrong and people would argue with me. So I would be open to that. But who would you say that I need to deal with as I've dealt with Leatherface and or Michael Myers? I just get one more.
The odds are better you get Jason.
Yeah. I think so too. So I don't even know. I haven't. I guess they've done a couple of Jason versus Freddy movies lately, but they haven't really been active with the Jason Friday the 13th franchise, have they?
There was a big rights lawsuit that I think is finally getting settled. So we should start seeing more from that IP shortly. So here's hoping.
Yeah. Or it's just, maybe Art the Clown finds his way onto that Mount Rushmore. I'm not willing to do that yet, but okay.
Art's definitely climbing his way to the top.
All right. Freddy Krueger also has earned a lot of respect. Let's be honest.
Oh yeah. Well, Freddy worked his way not just from horror, but like into pop culture. I mean, he started in horror and moved his way into like a pop culture icon, which is just astounding. So that a lot of that credit to the writers and Robert Englund himself for the way he portrays him. Propels that character into this wise ass pop culture icon of perpetuity. It's crazy to think that this blade wielding burn victim is, even if you've never watched a horror movie, who Freddy Krueger is, and you can probably quote Freddy Krueger. You know, it's just astounding.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
And, you know, going back to in Texas, your time on Texas Chainsaw. Recently, I did a deep dive on the remake and the subsequent prequel to that, Texas Chainsaw Beginning. And you have probably one of the coolest death scenes in that movie.
And there's a lot of death. There's a lot of death
Yeah.
scenes. These are very violent movies. I was shocked when I went to the premiere to see how violent which I was in Texas Chainsaw, the beginning, the origin story for. And there's so much information that's passed on, you know, like for not necessarily for the devout Texas enthusiast, but just for the casual fan to understand that that guy's name is Thomas Hewitt. He is a Hewitt. And interestingly, just based on credits as they roll on the credit sheets, my name in the movie is Sheriff Winston Hoyt, Hoyt, which is also the character that R. Lee Ermey, God rest his soul, he's passed now. He takes my identity after blowing my head off with a shotgun. He becomes that nefarious sheriff that is, you know, kind of puppet mastering this little geography right here. And he becomes Sheriff Hoyt. But in the credits, I'm credited as Sheriff Winston, which is my first name. And he's credited as Sheriff Hoyt, which is my last name, Winston Hoyt. And it's a bit confusing, or I was confused, because oftentimes at the conventions, I will get a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, either a photo or a poster or whatnot. And I'm like, well, I'm credited as Sheriff Winston, but I'm actually the original Sheriff Hoyt, you know? So lately I've just been signing Sheriff Winston Hoyt so they understand. But little Easter egg of minutia that means nothing except to the most devoted fan.
Well, and that was one of the greatest things about Beginnings was they took a lot of the lore that was already there and started filling in the blanks on how it got there, like why Uncle Monty's in a wheelchair, how R. Lee Ermey became Sheriff Hoyt, and you know, like I said, you had one of the coolest death scenes, and it was followed up by one of the coolest lines in the movie. You get your head blown off.
Yeah.
Just unsuspectingly, you know, you turn around, just head blown off. Gunny goes, I just killed the whole sheriff's department.
Yeah, he did.
You know?
Yeah.
It was so funny. Just,
you know,
that was like that switch from just this gruesome death to, I just killed the whole sheriff's department.
And there was a lot leading up to that because we did this whole improv scene driving out there, not to reveal R. Lee Ermey, because, of course, the remake of Texas Chainsaw had already happened with the Jessica Biel character, the heroine there. And so we were telling the prequel to that, and we knew out there looming, we'd already seen Sheriff Hoyt as a villain. And so we were trying to not reveal until that big moment. Sheriff, we have a problem. You know, what problem? And I turn around and then we reveal R. Lee Ermey with my shotgun out of my cruiser, blowing my head off in a mist that would be akin to a watermelon getting hit. And our biggest challenge that day was how, interestingly, so I was wearing sort of the county Mountie, Smokey the Bear hat, and I put it on when I left the car, as you do. That's pretty standard. And then we needed, because it was CGI, to get the hat off, so I had to almost put it on as I exited the car and then take it off as I'm approaching Leatherface with my revolver pulled, which didn't make any sense. To put a hat on in the sun, that made sense, but to take it off did not. So, and we only needed it to be taken off because the CGI effect would be ruined if I was wearing a hat. So that was our challenge, and it took a lot of the afternoon. But that was the three of us with R. Lee Ermey, who I had done a movie with before, and also Andrew Bernarski, and it was a couple days work doing that scene, and then I had a couple days also going to pick up R. Lee Ermey at the house, and you might want to help me wrangle in this retard nephew of yours, which I just kept poking the bear a little bit. But in that conversation, indicating that, this town was drying up, and I was actually leaving the police force to go to Detroit and work on the assembly line of a car manufacturer for better money, better pay. And that prompted R. Lee to say, well, I just killed the whole sheriff's department. So there you go.
That set him up to be like, well, if I killed him, there's no more law.
Yeah,
cool.
He's the law. Right.
Now, how did working with Rob Zombie come about?
Well, that was interesting because that was all about a casting director, Monica Mickelson, who was casting The Devil's Rejects, but she had cast me in a movie previous called Serving Sarah with Matthew Perry, God rest his soul. And during the course of this, it was a comedy. I'd been cast out of Texas to play a role. And I got very sick. You had mentioned being a cancer survivor. I got sick and was diagnosed. And I was being treated with leukemia and was really not going to get well enough to do this role. But oddly, during that same time, Matthew Perry relapsed with his drug addiction and went into rehab. So it's like, who's going to get well first, Matthew Perry or Lew Temple, to resume this movie? And Matthew did. And I was replaced by Mike Judge, the writer, comedian of Beavis and Butthead and so many other things. But Monica Mickelson remembered me. And during the course of building The Devil's Rejects, I had moved to Hollywood by this time, and she found me and asked me to come in and read for this role of Adam Banjo. And she sent me the script, and I'd never read anything like that. Where the opening page is some giants dragging a naked girl through the forest. I didn't even know they could film stuff like that. So I was like, whoa, what is this? And then when I went to the audition down in Venice to, read, I recognized that some actors who I knew that were really talented, Steve Zahn, i.e. Jeremy Davies, these kind of guys were reading for Adam Banjo. I was like, oh shoot, this is for real. And so I kind of did my thing, which it landed with Rob. He kind of liked my vibe. And then it just got a little more serious until they finally made an offer. And I was fortunate enough to connect with Rob and for Adam Banjo. So, and what was great about the Adam Banjo role was a lot of it was written on the page, but a lot of it was also liberty that Rob gave me to build a character with a lot of bravado that sort of puts his dress on, gets a little emasculated, and then has to rise up again to fight for his life and go down in a blaze of glory, heroically, so to speak, and with a lot of heart and effort. He and Roy Sullivan getting killed out in the desert by Otis, almost, yeah.
For the short amount of time you're there, you had this really strong character arc from, like you said, basically got, beat to the ground emotionally and like humiliated and just, like eviscerated, like just without being eviscerated. And then, you rise back up in the desert, you go toe to toe with Otis, and you almost take him, which would have made the movie a lot shorter.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
we had him. I don't know how he was able to pull that knife and shoot that pistol. And
if it weren't for the boot knife, Devil's Rejects would have been a lot shorter.
That's true. And so that was all orchestrated. So we were. I give Rob a lot of credit for allowing me to recognize that character arc of what that could be. That was kind of, my peck and paw sensibility of what this Straw Dogs type of character was and where we were being held hostage and victims in that motel room, and that it would land. But I think Rob gave all the characters in the Devil's Rejects a special arc of life that we all invested in as an audience to really engage our interest. And I think that's why this movie works so well and is a cult classic, because everyone in the movie, from the guy that sells the chickens, Rhode Island Reds, to those are called droids, boss, Michael Berryman's character, to, just all of them, E.G. Daily, to, PJ Souls, what's wrong? Don't you like clowns? Don't you think we're funny? And I always still say, Moose, that movie's built on the four guys who have magic experience in the horror genre that could not be replicated. That would be obviously Sid Haig, God rest his soul, Bill Moseley, Ken Foray, and William Forsythe. And they all had this capacity to invade on your personal space through the camera lens, so that you always felt like you were backpedaling from these guys in the scenes. And it just worked. It just was lightning in a bottle. And I give Rob a lot of credit for recognizing it and letting it happen and play out, not trying to manipulate it, and recognizing that there was something really special there. So that's cool. Everybody brought their A game, and again, those four guys that I mentioned at the table read, they were on fire. So we all knew we had to be above board. And I don't know, I'm going to sit here and be the old guy with the saber that says, get off my lawn. But I just don't know that in today's genre specific horror that we have the skill set of that grouping of those four guys. We're talking about Lon Chaney-ish. We're talking about Bela Lugosi capacity, Christopher Plummer, Vincent Price skill set, okay? That you don't just get to put on makeup and embellish a character and then present it and have the same effect. Clearly you do. because it's happening, and those audience numbers are as great as they've ever been. But I am saying, when you break down a picture, there's something special to what happened in The Devil's Rejects for a special reason.
With Devil's Rejects, you had a cast of seasoned character actors who have done this for ages and have had time to hone their craft, have had, different opportunities to, like, Ken Foray, for example. You take him from Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
He kills it in that movie. Fast forward to Devil's Rejects, and he still has that same almost stoic delivery, but with comedy. And
yeah,
he still looks like he's going to kick your ass. Bill Moseley looks deranged.
Right.
And he's a very, having talked to them briefly about it, he's a very method actor when it comes to that. In that, when he has to go into Otis, he is Otis. He goes into that, like, serial killer mindset, and he flips that switch. He's not Bill Moseley actor. He is Otis. Redneck killer, doesn't give a fuck about anybody. He's there to fuck shit up. So when you're on set with, Otis, you're on set with Otis. You're not on set with Bill Moseley. And that's what's going to come across on camera. I do think that's a lot of what's missing from some of the newer movies is, it's that level of commitment. And not to say that the newer movies aren't good, but that's why that lightning in a bottle works so well, because there was that added layer of commitment from these actors that, took what could easily be nonsensical roles, and they took them very seriously and made them their own. At this point, Sid Haig will always be Captain Spaulding. No matter what, no matter what he did before, he will always be Captain Spaulding. Now, Bill Moseley, he definitely has a bunch of credits. For a lot of people, he will always be Otis. Just because, the way he delivered that role, he is Otis. There's just no way around it. It's just the way that as a package, this was delivered. And I don't think it could be replicated.
Well, but Rob did try, I think, with Three from Hell, or, he revisited that, as we do. We're always trying to keep a franchise alive, and seems like a good idea. And, I don't have any judgment on that, or any, keep in mind, Devil's Rejects was a sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses, which, I think he got it right in The Devil's Rejects. I always look at the House of a Thousand Corpses as sort of his film school. It was kind of a cool psychedelic trip, lot more supernatural, and The Devil's Rejects was just more story-based, dark comedy, grounded in a certain reality, and I think it worked better. And then, trying to pick up the pieces in Three from Hell, it's a different thing. So
I think it worked as a finale, as well as a better finale than going out, getting shot, going down the highway.
Yeah.
I think it was the ending that the Firefly family needed.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, were there some missteps in the movie? Yeah. But as far as the characters go, it was the ending that story needed.
Mm.
Speaking of things that story needed, and Rob Zombie, in a previous interview a couple years back, you know, so this is before Monsters came out. You mentioned that you were a Monsters fan, and you know,
Yeah.
you were talking about you were excited and about how the Monster movie coming out, and
Right.
you were hoping it was going to be good and everything. What were your thoughts?
Well, I feel like Rob got handicapped a lot. From what I understand, inside information is that it was a movie that production had started and stopped on a couple of occasions. I think the um, the studio kind of changed gears on it, which put Rob in a bit of a compromised situation. So um, I think it had some difficulties in and of itself in production value, so to speak. Um, I like that Rob wanted to tell the story of the Munsters. I probably don't need an origin story for Herman Munster. I just need him dropped into Mockingbird Lane and let the neighbors deal with it. And I always felt like that was what was great about the Munsters, the oddity, the just the novelty of having Frankenstein living down the block from you. So I didn't really need maybe to know where he came from or how he was built or um, uh, so yeah, I think I was okay with it. I know that Rob loves that franchise, and I know that it was so dear to him. And I think there were some things that were out of his control that restricted him, and so maybe it wasn't the movie that um, he wanted. But all in all, I think it was kind of cool, and so. Um, I loved Dan Roebuck's portrayal as Grandpa. I'd always said, I'd like to play Grandpa, but Dan Roebuck was spot on, ideal.
Dan killed
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So I think that was a credit, to all of them, and so it's not easy because you two part one for fans of the franchise, you're trying to own up to that, and two, for anyone who doesn't know the franchise, which is a whole two generations
Mm-hmm.
that don't recognize it or don't have experience with it, you're trying to land it with them, and that in and of itself is a whole different focus and ideology than trying to pay homage to the original. So I think there's some traps there that you can fall into, and maybe they did.
Well, and even with that all aside, as a fan of the Munsters and a fan of Rob Zombie, I think he gave us something in the world of the Munsters. I mean, I absolutely loved the movie.
Oh, cool. Good for you.
I mean, I grew up watching the Munsters.
Right.
And,
excuse me.
So when it was announced, I super excited that, all right, we're getting Munsters. And then I hear Rob Zombie's attached. I'm like, all right, cool, we're getting Rob Zombie's Munsters. And then you're reading all the hate online. You're like, you know what? Fuck off. I don't care. And you're watching it, and it's like, no, this is still the Munsters. I mean, it still has that campy feeling, that that over the top feeling. And that was one of the things that people nitpicked on. It's like, go back and watch the show. That was the Munsters. I mean, that's what made the show fun. That's like that was what gave it its heart and its feeling. And despite all the production hiccups and the traps that it walked into, he captured the heart of the monsters.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it carried over, and God bless him for it. You know, I was so happy to get new monsters.
Here's a tough question for you, for being somebody that has a 14-year-old in their life. Did they like it?
Yeah, she enjoyed it.
Did they like it as much as Wednesday, the franchise that Netflix puts out?
So it not as much as Wednesday, because it was, darker, and I think her exact words were, Wednesday's like a dark Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But she did enjoy the monsters because it had more comedy to it. So it was more horror comedy.
Right.
Whereas Wednesday's more serious.
I think so.
Which is a little strange for Adam's family, because even that was more camp. But
yeah.
I still like Wednesday for everything it has to put out. But if you're capturing, if you're going for capturing the heart of what the original IP was, Rob nailed it. And I would love to see, if he could swing it, more Munster stuff from him.
Yeah, I think that's maybe something that he's definitely capable of. What his interests are, I don't know.
So we're not going to be able to talk about everything today, because good Lord, there's a lot. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about The Walking Dead. You play this kind of sleazy prison inmate, which I think is kind of cool, because if you look at the majority of your character roles, you get cast in very similar roles outside of like horror. So to see you get this kind of like almost sleazebag role is a really good departure from like just this almost wholesome Southerner, I guess would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah. Axel was, he was complicated. And with good reason, because I think the writers at some point, while having the blueprint from the graphic novels, weren't sure which way they wanted to go intentionally, and also were running out of time in figuring it out. And so, at some point I had been advised of a character trait that led me to make choices one way, and then, halfway through the season, that gear changed rather overtly, and I had to switch tone entirely and come up with something different. And so mainly I wanted to bring to The Walking Dead just a kind of a certain amount of levity and lightness that the show didn't really have. It would, there's never any humor in The Walking Dead per se, and I wanted to offer at least a little bit of it, and then also have a character that was somewhat transparent as to what they were feeling, wearing their heart on their sleeve a little bit, which was, who I thought Axel could be. And, generally just trying to fit in and be accepted by the group. And which is never easy, whether you're going to a new school or taking on a new job or being in prison and incarcerated and trying to be accepted by strangers when you get out. So it was a lot going on. But look, that was a cultural phenomena that I'm proud proud and grateful to be a part of. It's the gift that keeps on giving. It's a big part of the visibility that I was able to acquire from having been on the show. And but also, as much as anything, the work was good, not just my work, but everyone's work. And it was good because the writing was good. So we were all on a good team. That was a really good team.
There's a lot that goes into a show like that, so there's a lot of work to go around, and it's good for a lot of people in the business.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're a caterer or a cameraman or a stunt person or a makeup effects artist, or regardless of what role you take in the entertainment industry, a show like that is good for everybody. And for it to run as long as it did, that's a lot of jobs.
Yeah. It was a big production, and we did employ a lot of people, and they were all happily employed because they believed in the work. And everybody was pulling on the same side of the rope. There was no hierarchy. There were no divas. It was a really special place to be. And I maintain that is why the show was as successful as it was.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anytime I hear anybody talk about The Walking Dead that worked on The Walking Dead, it's nothing but, good stories. Everybody loved working on it. Everyone was treated well. So when you have a set dynamic like that, for a show to run that long, you're set up for success from the beginning.
That's right.
I'm going to have you on again. On your IMDb, you're listed with 14 upcoming projects.
Oh wow! I wish those were working right now. I'd be working right now. I think there's a fair share of those that have been built that we've got in the can, and I think there's some of those that are to be built that are maybe on hold.
It's about 50-50, yeah.
Or stalled out, and so there's always the best intention to go out and get financed, but so we'll be hopeful for most of those.
One in post-production I'm really looking forward to talking about at a future time, and that's the Ed Kemper movie.
Oh yeah. So I've been doing these films for a filmmaker that I know, Chad Farron. And so I did a movie for him years ago called a real strange movie, really psychologically crazy, called Someone's Knocking on the Door, something like that. And, I recognized his film fortitude, and he's reached out several times for me to be engaged. I did Pig Killer for him, which was so he specializes in these true crime stories. These are true stories about serial killers, and clearly Ed Kemper being one of them. I actually play Ed Kemper Jr., which is his father. When he's a young boy, and offer some insight as to what his upbringing was to lead him down that path. I have not seen that movie. I only know the material that I did, and having read the script, I understand that. But Chad's had a lot of success in making these movies. We just did another one recently called Dorothea. Dorothea was a serial killer here in California as well. A lady who would bury people out in her garden, old people. And so he has a formula of getting these things made and getting them distributed. They also are fairly shocking in not just story and content, but maybe in gore a little bit. So, I think as long as you're telling a story, you can use a lot of different bells and whistles. But if your story isn't in place and you're just all hat with special effects or special effects makeup, blood and latex and all this other, various accoutrement that's just messy. Maybe that's not storytelling. Maybe that's just art project. So, but I think Ed Kemper has a story, and I think it's really interesting. And the actor portraying him, I was impressed with, and feeling like it'll be interesting. It'll be weird. Let's put it that way. It'll be weird. Pig Killer was weird, but also very interesting. True stories, believe it or not.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. Where can listeners keep up to date with everything you got going on?
Well, I'm always on the social medias. I've been really busy just trying to promote my appearances lately because, I want people to be able to have access to Axel. So I'm at Instagram, Lew Temple actor. I'm at Facebook, which is a Lew Temple, at X, which is Lew Temple actor. I'm at TikTok, which is also Lew Temple actor. So all of those socials are great. But also, I have a website called lewtemple.online. So it's www.lewtemple, one word, .online. That's one word, ONLINE. And it's a website that keeps up with my whereabouts, keeps up with my activities, and most importantly, it is a shop that has a lot of merchandise available. And when I say that, I don't just mean autographs on 8x10s, but also a lot of custom props from films I've been in and or wardrobe. Ooh. And so really cool stuff. And so, yeah, check me out. Thank you.
Listeners, those links will be in the episode description. And you can find me and other great podcasters over at electronicmediacollective.com. Be sure to follow me on Facebook at Moose's Monster Mash and on YouTube at Moose Media Inc. Lou, I couldn't have asked for a better interview. And like
thanks for having me.
We are definitely going to have to do this again because we barely scratched the surface and there's so much more I want to talk about.
Well, happy holidays to you, Moose, and to your family. And, keep smiling, makes the world a better place, and keep telling your story as it relates to horror, buddy.
Absolutely. And come back tomorrow, folks, for another installment of the 13 Horrifying Days of Christmas. And until next time, Horror Hounds, mash on.
This has been Moose's Monster Mash. Come back for more chills and thrills if you dare.